Hello and welcome to Real Opinions, and today I'm going to be reviewing Pacific Rim Uprising, which is obviously the sequel to Pacific Rim. This is set 10 years after the first film and focuses on Jake Pentecost, played by John Boyega, and he is the son of the apocalypse-cancelling Stacker Pentecost, who was Idris Elba's character from the original film. Just like his father, Jake is a promising Jaeger pilot, but he mysteriously dropped out of the training program and settled for a life on the black market instead. And basically what he does is he makes a living stripping down decommissioned robots and selling their scrap components. But when one of his scavenging missions goes awry because of like a deal gone bad, Jake is taken into custody and given an ultimatum. Either he can go to jail, or he can re-enlist in the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps and take on some new recruits under his wing, including the plucky Amara, who is played by Kaylee Spaney? And she's this, like, scrapper who's been putting together her own Jaegers in her spare time. And he reluctantly agrees to train up this new generation of pilots, which he happens to do just in time because the long-dormant kaiju threat is now poised to re-emerge, and then punching happens. Lots and lots of punching for 2 hours. If, like me, you actually really like the first Pacific Rim, you might have been a bit nervous about this film. Because what worked about the first Pacific Rim was, even though it had a very similar story and a very similar premise to things like Transformers, it didn't feel like a corporate product. Because of the involvement of Guillermo del Toro, it instead felt like an overgrown man-child had picked up some action figures and just started gleefully mashing them together. Less a commercial franchise film, and more the product of a particularly excitable 10-year-old just who've been given the keys to millions upon millions of dollars and Legendary Entertainment's bank vault. And in that sense, I thought it was really, really fun. I think in anyone else's hands, it could have been a bad, very generic tentpole film, but in his hands, it was clear that he didn't think of it as just a quick paycheck. It might have been a brainless spectacle to everyone else, but to Del Toro, it was something greater. It was a chance to let his enthusiastic imagination run wild and to translate his childhood fantasies onto the big screen. And for that, I give it a big thumbs up. So now here we are, 5 years later, and Del Toro has left because this spent so long in production hell, and he's got obviously thousands of ideas gestating, and he wants to crack on with things. This is why he left The Hobbit. So he ditched this, and the keys have been handed to Stephen K. DeKnight. And this is why I said you might be worried if you liked the first one, because Stephen S. DeKnight, sorry, it's not Stephen K. DeKnight, it's S. DeKnight. Stephen S. DeKnight is a man who I have no idea why he's been chosen. His IMDb is bereft of cinematic offerings. He's basically worked in TV forever, and he's responsible for that fucking dreadful Spartacus show. So I don't really know why he's been picked as the successor to one of the finest filmmakers of this generation. But also, Pacific Rim, as I just said, it felt like Del Toro's baby. He put a lot of work into the world building, into the designs. It felt like something he was really passionate about. And without his nurturing influence, I don't know how it would survive, but particularly in the hands of a man like Stephen S. DeKnight, I really don't know how it would survive. So, off the bat, like I say, I was skeptical. I was worried. The trailers made it look like what I feared, which was a much more restrained studio product, not the mental madcap ramblings of a genius like Del Toro. Luckily, I actually think those fears were mostly unfounded. I think Stephen S. DeKnight does a pretty good job here. He's not Del Toro, absolutely not. And a lot of his direction feels a bit workmanlike, but he is a million miles from people like Michael Bay or Roland Emmerich. He manages to craft impressive set pieces without ever slipping into the monotonous and disorienting excess of something like Transformers or Man of Steel. Everything's clear, no matter how much destruction is unfolding on screen, and no matter how many pieces he is having to move around, you can always keep a track of where everyone is and what they are doing, which is a plus for this type of film. It's refreshingly coherent, and it's well staged, and the choreography of the fights is really fun. It's also good, the fights are quite resourceful and inventive. He adds in loads of crazy new gadgets for the Jaegers to use in the fight scenes, and he does try to make each fight feel distinct. Like there's a cool chase from inside a Jaeger at one point, where they're like, characters are running away from their pursuers and like jumping over the internal mechanisms of a Jaeger, and that felt clever. And there's like a bit where they're using a gravity sling, which is a bit like the gravity gun from Half-Life 2, but they're using it to like pull down skyscrapers on top of monsters. And in moments like that, where it's running wild with the fun gimmicks, this is a riotous blast, and it's dumb fun, but it's the best kind of dumb fun that will bring a grin to your face. Having said that, whilst I think The Knight seems to appreciate the ingredients of a diverting action sequence, I don't think he is as skillful as someone like Del Toro, especially not when it comes to imagery. In the first film, the towering Jaegers and the massive kaiju always felt palpably immense, and that was because Del Toro knew how to use tiny little details to emphasize their scale. So for instance, he had like oceans displace whenever a monster climbed out onto land, and it was kind of like how a person gets out of the bath and the water swishes around. And he also did these really good shot compositions that showed how the behemoths dwarfed humans. It was a lot like what Gareth Edwards did with Godzilla, where they used cinematography to really make you feel the immense scale. The Knight isn't as good at that kind of stuff. He doesn't have a knack for awe-inspiring visuals or for dramatic presentation. I think this is best exemplified by the way that the action is, for some reason, shot at Jaeger height throughout, so you never get to look at things from the ground level. This means that when the giant colossi are rampaging through the city, it just looks to you like it might as well be two normal-sized people fighting in a miniature village, especially since they empty the streets of pedestrians, so it does look like that. So you don't ever feel the scale. And that's a shame, because as I said, he's good at the fight sequences, but he's not good at making them feel like big, epic, massive scale destruction. It looks kind of small. There's nothing here to rival, say, Godzilla's Halo jump sequence, or the Statue of Liberty getting its head decapitated in Cloverfield. There's no image like that sums up how big these things are, and I think that is a real shortcoming. Basically, what I'm saying is that I don't think it has any flair cinematically, and that extends to things like the creature design, which feels a lot more bland than it did in the first film, the world building, which is kind of skirted over, and like I said, just the imagery, where in the first one it felt like you were watching concept art come to life, like when these massive colossi are holding like a little fishing trawler in their hand against this big raging storm. It looked really impressive, and here things look kind of bright and bland and normal. So it feels like where the first film was bursting with intriguing lore and this almost like mythical visual style, this feels a lot more restrained and less ambitious too. And so I think for this reason, Del Toro fans will miss the first film's comparative artistry and breadth. I know people are going to go, artistry, it's just robots punching monsters, but I said comparative, okay, dickheads? Nevertheless, Uprising does manage to improve upon its predecessor in at least a couple of ways. Most surprising of all is actually the story, which has been considerably bulked up. They've added in this interesting conflict revolving around remotely piloted Jaegers and sort of like a bit of espionage and politics going on around that. And there's a clever, legitimately unpredictable twist, which the most surprising thing about this surprising twist is that it's in Pacific Rim. You know, the most surprising thing is that Pacific Rim can surprise me, because I did not see this coming, and it builds upon a minor plot point in the first film in a way that's really quite neat and has a good ripple effect onto the rest of the film. Moreover, the characters are vastly superior this time around. John Boyega's Jake is a much more magnetic protagonist than Charlie Hunnam's Riley ever was. I know that Ben in particular will probably be happy to hear that because he hates Charlie Hunnam. But Charlie Hunnam was a very cookie-cutter military gruff man in the first film. Whereas because Jake is a bit rebellious and a bit of a dick, it actually makes him much more interesting. It also helps that John Boyega has got a considerable amount of charisma, and he routinely manages to save what would otherwise be excruciating comedy scenes, because the writing in this film is not very good, but he manages to elevate it just through his sheer likability. And then Kaylee Spaney, whatever her name is, the sort of secondary lead, I think she's a very charming presence as well, and it elevates what could have been a very annoying character. And when the two of them are talking to each other, I think that they actually give the film something of a heart. They have this kind of mentor-protege dynamic that works quite well. well. It's cheesy and it's Saturday morning cartoony, but it's entertaining, and that's all it needs to be. Oh, and Charlie Day gets to go absolutely batshit in this, which as an Always Sunny fan is great, because he reminded me of like Charlie Kelly at times. Like, he was just slipping into that role because he starts shrieking and playing. He gets to do some quite out there stuff towards the end, and that was a positive for me. I can see his character annoying some people, but I think if you're a fan of It's Always Sunny, you'll have fun thinking that it's Charlie Kelly infiltrating a big budget blockbuster. So overall, I think Pacific Rim Uprising, it lacks the magic touch of Del Toro. It has downgraded visuals and a lower caliber of imagination. Oh, and also they got rid of the really awesome pulsating score from the first film. I don't know why they did that, because it was really like such a good exhilarating theme that it had, and they got rid of that and replaced the composer, and I thought that was a bad decision. But having said that, I think it's still a very entertaining film with good action scenes, some fun gadgets, and some nice character work, even if it's simplistic. And I overall think that it will deliver what it says on the tin. So if you are the type of person who likes big monster movies, I think you should go see it, and I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.